Well, it looked like it's getting real, man, for Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever. Shout out to Frank Pope. This information I'm about to tell you is alleged. He did an interview allegedly with a former Vanderbilt player. Now, I'm not sure if they released the name of the player. I think the player maybe wanted to remain anonymous. But this here is picking up steam because what this former player allegedly had to say about Stephanie White is very concerning with how they ran things over there with the Vanderbilt basketball team. During her tenure there in Nashville, Tennessee,
the psych ward, that was the absolute breaking point. A former Vanderbilt player just went public with allegations that are sending massive shockwaves through the entire basketball world. She described an environment so toxic, so mentally draining, and so physically punishing that one of her own teammates ended up in a psychiatric facility. This is not just about missed shots or bad rotations anymore. This is about a culture of fear and alleged psychological warfare that defined Stephanie White's tenure in Nashville. The silence has finally been broken, and the details coming to light are more disturbing than anyone could have ever imagined. The coaching pedestal is starting to crumble as the past catches up to the present in the most public way possible.
Over there with the Vanderbilt basketball team. During her tenure there in Nashville, Tennessee, there has been a lot of concerns with Stephanie White. A lot of locker room drama she was causing, and a bunch of stuff is definitely looking like it is about to hit the fan. Now, just like I stated, there was a video that has been released. Let me see if I can pull it up here because this is very interesting, man. Very, very interesting. So this is Frank Pope's YouTube channel. Let me look and see if I can get it pulled up for you guys real quick.
The fire started when leaked audio from an interview with Frank Pope began circulating online. While the player chose to remain anonymous to protect herself from the inevitable blowback, her testimony carries a weight that is impossible to ignore. She spoke with a raw honesty that paints a picture of a locker room in total disarray, where players were allegedly treated more like machines than human beings. This is outstanding journalism that has brought hidden history to the surface, and it is picking up steam because the patterns described by this former player look eerily similar to what fans are seeing right now. If these allegations are proven true, the reputation of one of the most prominent coaches in the league is about to hit the fan.
Even years. Fever fans, we have been asking the same question. What exactly is going on behind the scenes in the locker room with the Indiana Fever? What's happening? Then I interviewed a former Vanderbilt player who had a lot to say about what was going on inside of their locker room while Stephanie White was there. And let's just say it sounds eerily familiar. I'll let you hear it for yourself. Okay, here we go. Let's play this clip. No further ado.
Yeah, basically up, down. So, down and back, down and back, down and back, down and back. We'd probably run about 40 of those and then have to go play a game.
The physical toll described in this interview is nothing short of brutal. Imagine running 40 full-court sprints, down and back, over and over, until your lungs burn and your legs feel like lead. Now imagine being forced to do that right before you have to step out and play a high-stakes game. The former player claimed that Stephanie White would run the team into the ground, leaving them with zero energy when it actually mattered. This kind of mismanagement isn't just bad coaching, it is a recipe for disaster. When your players are constantly exhausted before the opening tip, you aren't preparing them for success, you are setting them up for failure and potential injury, which is exactly what the whistleblower says happened.
Yeah, basically up, down. So, down and back, down and back, down and back, down and back. We'd probably run about 40 of those and then have to go play a game. Our star players would be hurt all the time. They weren't taken care of the way they needed to be taken care of. Film was pointless. Most of the time, her film was incorrect. Like, it would be like, oh, she's not a shooter, we're not going to guard her, and then she'd make 10 threes against us, and she'd have an all-time scoring game. What else? We didn't really go over what we did wrong.
Now, if this is true, and this former player just said this, right?
Injuries were apparently a constant dark cloud over the program during that time. The star players were allegedly hurt all the time because they weren't being taken care of the way professional or top-tier collegiate athletes should be. Instead of recovery and strategic rest, they were met with more grinding and more demands. The former player pointed out that the medical and physical needs of the roster were seemingly secondary to the rigid and punishing schedule set by the coaching staff. It raises a massive red flag about the long-term health of any athlete playing under this system. If the stars are always on the sidelines, you have to look at the person holding the whistle and ask why the training load is so misaligned with reality.
But this sounds very familiar because this shows and proves Stephanie White do not prepare the team for the entire roster. She only prepare the team for standout players, which is horrible as a coach. You have to prepare your team going into the game for the entire damn team. You gotta take accountability. So-and-so coming off the bench, she might hit you. She do this and that. And then that come with film study. So what if the Fever coaching staff is not doing the proper preparation with film study, with preparing for these games? And if that is the case, this is bigger.
Scouting and film study are supposed to be the backbone of a winning team, but according to this former player, those sessions were basically pointless. She claimed that the film being shown was often flat-out incorrect. In one shocking example, the staff would tell the players that an opponent was not a shooter and didn't need to be guarded on the perimeter. That same opponent would then go out and drop 10 three-pointers, setting all-time scoring records against them. There was no accountability for these massive scouting blunders. Instead of adjusting or admitting a mistake, the cycle would just continue. This lack of preparation is a nightmare for any player who is trying to execute a game plan that is fundamentally flawed from the start.
So I was a little bit late for practice, and my therapist called and told her, hey, she's going to be late. We went a little bit over today, but, she needed it, mentally. And I still got punished. I had 2 weeks of punishment. So I had to wake up every morning at 4 a.m., get to the gym and work out and do all this crazy, insane cardio and ridiculous workouts for being late to practice because I was in my therapy session. So that was the last straw. My friend actually ended up going to the psych ward while we were at Vanderbilt. It was just
The grind didn't stop at the film room or the sprints. We are talking about practices that allegedly lasted for 4 or 4.5 hours. That is an insane amount of time to keep athletes on the floor, especially during a grueling season. The player mentioned that it didn't matter how tired they were run to death regardless of the schedule. By the time game day arrived, their legs were completely gone. Nobody could perform at a high level because they were already spent. This isn't just tough coaching, it's a total lack of team management. It shows a complete disregard for the science of sport and the necessity of keeping players fresh for the moments that actually count on the scoreboard.
In my therapy session. So that was the last straw. My friend actually ended up going to the psych ward while we were at Vanderbilt. It was just a really toxic environment, very toxic environment. Teammates were put against each other. She would tell certain teammates things and then another person this. It was just strange, just all weird, very strange, very toxic. Yeah.
So that was the interview. You guys can watch the full video in its entirety on the Pope B. Frank YouTube channel there. And man, if this is true, this is damaging. This is damaging to Stephanie White.
Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire testimony was the story about a therapy session. The player explained that she was in a mental health session that ran slightly over the scheduled time. Her therapist even called the coach to explain the situation, emphasizing that the player needed that extra time for her mental well-being. You would think a coach would be understanding of a student-athlete's mental health, but that wasn't the case here. Instead of empathy, she was met with cold, hard punishment. It didn't matter that it was a medical necessity. In that locker room, being a few minutes late for a therapy session was treated like a betrayal of the team, and the consequences were designed to break her.
That is why this conversation matters. This is not about wanting the league to fail. It's the opposite. I believe shining a light on this is one of the only ways to help save the league from itself. And more importantly, to help save Caitlin Clark from being swallowed by an organization and a league that still do not seem to understand what they have. She has a coaching staff that looks overmatched. She has an organization that has fumbled the greatest opportunity women's basketball has ever been handed. She has a shoe deal that should have been celebrated like globally in an event standpoint. Yet somehow delayed.
The punishment for that therapy session was a 2-week-long nightmare. Every single morning, the player had to wake up at 4 a.m. to get to the gym for insane cardio and ridiculous workouts. This was on top of the already grueling practice schedule. It was a calculated effort to punish a young woman for prioritizing her mental health. For 2 weeks, she lived in a state of sleep deprivation and physical agony, all because she dared to stay in a therapist's office a few minutes too long. This kind of discipline is exactly what people mean when they talk about a toxic environment. It's not about building character. It's about exerting total control and making sure the players know their personal needs don't matter. The locker room culture was allegedly built on a foundation of division. The former player claimed that teammates were constantly pitted against each other. The coach would tell one player one thing and then say something completely different to another, creating a web of confusion and mistrust. It was a strange, toxic atmosphere where you couldn't even trust the person standing next to you in the huddle. When a coach uses divide-and-conquer tactics on their own roster, the team's spirit dies a quick death. You can't win games when the internal chemistry is being intentionally sabotaged by the leadership. It makes you wonder how many talented careers were derailed by these weird mind games behind closed doors. This toxicity allegedly led to the ultimate tragedy, a player ending up in a psychiatric ward. When the pressure, the physical exhaustion, and the psychological games become too much, something has to give. The whistleblower was very clear that the environment was just really toxic and all weird. It wasn't just a tough program, it was a place that broke people down until they couldn't function anymore. Hearing these details now is making a lot of fans look at the current situation with the Indiana Fever through a very different lens. If this is how Stephanie White ran things in the past, people are starting to ask if those same patterns are starting to emerge in the professional ranks right now. The connection to the Fever is where things get truly heated. Fans have been asking for weeks what exactly is going on in that locker room. There has been so much drama and so many questionable decisions that people are looking for an explanation. When you hear about the lack of preparation and the failure to scout entire rosters at Vanderbilt, it starts to explain why the Fever looks so lost at times. If the coaching staff is only preparing for the standout players and ignoring the rest of the roster, they are leaving the door wide open for bench players to come in and clown them. We've seen role players go off for 25 points against the Fever, and now we might finally know why. Accountability is a word that seems to be missing from the current coaching staff's vocabulary. If you aren't doing proper film study and you aren't preparing your team for the entire opposing roster, that is a massive failure. You have to be able to tell your players exactly what the person coming off the bench is capable of. She might hit this shot, she likes to drive this way. That is basic basketball knowledge that comes from hours of study. If that isn't happening, it means the entire staff is trash, not just the head coach. This isn't just a Stephanie White issue, it is an organizational issue that is threatening to derail one of the most exciting eras in the history of the league. The lack of offensive flow and the exposed rotations are no longer small mistakes that can be ignored, they are being attacked by opposing coaches who can see the weaknesses from a mile away. Every time a fan points this out, the response from a section of the media is condescending. They tell the fans they are new and don't understand the game, but the eyes don't lie. When you see the same mistakes happening game after game and you hear these stories from the past, the picture becomes very clear. The league media has been trying to control the narrative, but the fans are refusing to be shamed into silence. They see the mismanagement, and they are demanding better for the players. The mismanagement of Caitlin Clark's impact is perhaps the biggest tragedy in all of this. She is a once-in-a-generation talent, a literal phenom who has brought mainstream attention to the league. Yet she has a coaching staff that looks completely overmatched by the moment. The organization has been handed the greatest opportunity in the history of women's basketball, and they are fumbling it. From the shoe deal delays to the handled agent situations, everything feels muted and mishandled. If they keep stifling her potential with bad coaching and toxic environments, they aren't just failing Caitlin Clark, they are failing the future of the entire league and every fan who tuned in to watch her. It's not just the fans who are noticing anymore. Even established media members are starting to shift their tone. The same questions that fans were mocked for asking just a few weeks ago are now being discussed in more acceptable rooms by more respectable voices. This didn't happen by accident, it happened because the fans refused to look away. They stopped accepting the idea that being a new fan means you don't know basketball. There are smart people out there with film, stats, and history who saw these red flags early on. They deserve credit for shining a light on the truth before the mainstream media was willing to admit there was even a problem. The WNBA wanted mainstream attention, and Caitlin Clark gave it to them. But with that attention comes a level of accountability that the league clearly wasn't ready for. You can't have a superstar of this magnitude and expect people to ignore poor coaching and toxic cultures. The spotlight is now white hot, and it is exposing everything from the rotations to the lack of offensive chemistry. If the Fever and the league keep mishandling this moment, the momentum will vanish as quickly as it arrived. You can't save a league from itself if the people in charge are more interested in controlling the conversation than actually fixing the product on the floor. The stories of sabotage are even reaching the digital world. There are claims that channels speaking out about Stephanie White have been targeted or even hacked after posting critical videos. While it's hard to prove a direct link, the timing is certainly suspicious. It looks like a coordinated effort to suppress any narrative that doesn't fit the league's preferred image, but the truth has a way of coming out, especially when former players start finding their voices. You can take down a video or a channel, but you can't take down the lived experiences of the women who were in those locker rooms. The pressure is building, and the lid is about to blow off. We have to ask ourselves why the media is so protective of a coaching staff that is clearly struggling. Is it a fear of losing access? Is it a desire to protect the old guard of the league from the new fans? Whatever the reason, it is doing a massive disservice to the sport. When the defense is being exposed and the offense has no flow, that is a basketball problem that needs a basketball solution. It's not ugly to ask why a generational talent is being squandered by an organization that doesn't seem to understand what they have in their hands. The fans are the ones who are actually trying to save the league by demanding excellence. The rotations being used right now are a banquet for opposing coaches to feast on. They know exactly how to exploit the lack of flexibility and the predictable patterns. When a coach refuses to adjust, they are essentially giving the game away. We saw it at Vanderbilt with the incorrect scouting reports, and we are seeing it now with the inability to manage the roster effectively. If the entire staff is not preparing these young ladies to go out there and ball out, then the entire staff needs to be held accountable. You can't just ride the coattails of a superstar and hope for the best, you have to actually coach, and right now, that isn't happening. The historical context provided by the former Vanderbilt player makes the current situation feel much more urgent. This isn't an isolated incident or a few bad games, this is a pattern of behavior that spans years and different levels of the game. If the environment is truly toxic, it will eventually poison the entire team. You can already see the frustration on the faces of the players. You can see the lack of joy in the game. When a locker room becomes a place of punishment and mind games instead of growth and competition, the results on the floor will always suffer. The heat Stephanie White is in is a result of her own history coming to light. The future of the league depends on how this moment is handled. If the WNBA chooses to ignore the voices of former players and the valid criticisms of the fans, they will lose the very audience they worked so hard to gain. Accountability isn't a bad thing, it's the only way to ensure the product remains elite. Caitlin Clark's light shouldn't be dimmed by an organization that is more interested in PR than performance. She deserves a coaching staff that is matched to her talent level, not one that is being investigated for alleged toxic behavior in the past. The fans have spoken. The players are speaking, and now the world is watching. We need to keep asking the hard questions and refusing to be shamed into silence. Don't let anyone convince you that your eyes are lying to you. If you see a team that is unprepared, a coach who is making baffling decisions, and a culture that feels off, you are probably right. The established media is finally starting to catch up, but they only did so because the fans forced their hand. This is about more than just one coach or one team, it's about the standard of excellence that should be expected at the highest level of the sport. The truth is finally coming out, and it's time to face it head on. As we move forward, the focus must remain on the players and their well-being.